Let me also kill another, fallacy for you today. People say Awolowo got up and said that starvation was a legitimate weapon of war. I've argued it, just to show you how, Hitler said something, and it's what you call a Goebbelian theory. Goebbels, the former Minister of Information of the Nazi regime under Hitler. It's a very interesting theory, and it's very true. If you repeat a lie enough times, people will eventually assume that it's the truth. And this statement that Awolowo was supposed to have made, as I said, I've quoted him wrongly, until I did my research, okay, that, he apparently said during the war, when confronted in Britain, that starvation is a legitimate weapon of war, okay? Most people say Awolowo said this. I was reading an article by my Egbon, Duro Onobule, yesterday in the Sun newspaper, in which he said the same thing. Now, I challenge anybody, to produce the newspaper, the link, whether in Britain or in Nigeria, anywhere, TV footage where he said that. And they cannot do so. You know why? I've looked. I've been looking for that for the last 10 years of my life. It doesn't exist. And you know what? I met the person that said it, who told me that he said it. And the man was not even a Yoruba man. It was an Ishekiri man by the name of Chief Alice Naida. He's still alive. He's the one that made that statement. And he was a key player within Gawan's government at the time. What Awolowo said was this, and it's quoted, it's in most of the British newspapers. You can find the link today if you want to. What he said, when confronted with this issue in the United Kingdom, was that, listen, a blockade is perfectly legitimate. I'm quoting him verbatim. A blockade is perfectly legitimate in a state of war. That you do not expect us to feed our enemies, meaning the Biafran soldiers. So the idea that he ever said that starvation is a legitimate weapon of war, and that these people should be starved to death, he never ever said so. It's a fallacy, it's a lie.
Okay, but he has gone on record to defend the policy of the Nigerian government.
But of course.
Of starvation. Now,
there was no policy of starvation. There was a blockade, which resulted in starvation as a consequence of the intransigence and stubborn nature of Ojukwu, who preferred to have his people, who preferred to watch his people starving than allow them to be given food. The Nigerian government offered food corridors. No Biafran has ever denied it. Ojukwu never denied it whilst he was still alive. No Biafran official today, since we wrote these articles, ever denied that. They accepted that. They were offered food corridors. They turned it down for whatever reason. Okay. Not only that, food was flown in. It's on record, regularly. Up until the time, by the international agencies, up until the time that it became clear they were not giving the food to the people it was supposed to be for. The soldiers and the children of the elite and the families of the elite were the ones eating that food, and the ordinary Biafran people were not getting the food. Whose fault is that? Well, on both counts. Starts with O and ends with you, Ojukwu. That's all. His fault.
You went on record blaming Ojukwu for the deaths of the millions of people who died in the Biafran War. Why would you...
I went on record.
You wrote that. You wrote that. You've received a lot of criticism. People have called you anti-Igbo.
Well,
how do you respond?
Well, first of all, what I said is what I've just told you now. That if Achebe is laying the blame for the deaths of hundreds of thousands, I will not say millions, because you see, I've heard 3 million Igbos died in the Civil War. It's not true. Okay, the Civil War. If you look at the whole thing, 2 million people estimated to have died, which is a terrible number of people. It's a huge number of people. It wasn't just Biafrans. Nigerians died as well. Okay. You understand me? And the 2 million included many Nigerian civilians, many Nigerian soldiers who fought for this country. I lost 3 uncles in that war. So it wasn't just Igbos that died. 2 million Nigerians and Biafrans died in that civil war. The idea that 2 million Igbo children were starved to death is a lie. It didn't happen. Now, what I said was this. If Achebe and other members of the Igbo intelligentsia seek to point fingers at anybody as regards the cause of the starvation that took place, they really should not point fingers at Gawan or Awolowo or anybody else on the Nigerian side. They really ought to point those fingers at themselves, that is their leader and themselves, because they were very comfortable, I repeat, to allow that to happen and deny their people humanitarian aid, medicine, and so on and so forth through food corridors, through that. It could have been avoided. The Nigerian government was very gracious. We weren't cruel. We were gracious, we were generous, and we were ready to do the very best we could when it was clear that the suffering was taking place. But the Biafrans, for one reason or the other, said no. So to that extent, yes, I believe that if you're going to say anybody's responsible for that suffering, monumental suffering, it really, is far more at the doorstep of Ojukwu and others around him than anybody else. And listen, I'm not alone in this. There's a man called Ralph Uweche, who for me is one of the most formidable, was one of the most, or is still alive, one of the most formidable people on the Biafran side. He's a great intellectual. He was the person that brought the French into the war. He was the Ojukwu's link man with the French. Okay, he is the person that negotiated with the French, that convinced them to join Biafra, to support Biafra, and so on and so forth, and indeed Portugal and the others. He's still alive. He wrote a book in 1971 called Reflections on the Nigerian Civil War. Ambassador Ralph Uweche. Go and read the book. This was a key player. This was the man that brought the French in, kept the French in the Civil War, okay, supporting Biafra. Read what he said in 1971 about Ojukwu and about the fact that Ojukwu placed more value on the propaganda and the suffering, to push out pictures of suffering children and children dying than he did on bringing in food and supporting, allowing food to get to the people. He was very comfortable with that. He didn't think so much about his own people. Uweche used words to the effect that he was ready to watch his people suffering rather than try and ameliorate their pain and allow the food in. And that he was more concerned with the propaganda and the political gain they would get from those pictures being shot all over the world. And I think if Uweche can say that, who is, he was a key player. Who is anybody? Where was this man, Achebe at the time? So we need to just be careful when we say some of these things, because these are the facts I'm coming up with. I'm not manufacturing them. I'm not the only person that said them, but these are the facts, and we need to be very accurate with facts when we're talking about history. So you said something about being anti-Igbo, that you said that. Yeah, let me just quickly address that. How on earth could anybody assume I'm anti-Igbo? The things I've written about Ojukwu, about his heroic position during the Civil War, in the sense that he sought to defend the lives and property of his own people, I believe he's a true hero. But like all heroes, like all great men, he's not infallible. Everybody, including Awolowo, including every single person that's ever been a great leader anywhere in the world, especially Nigeria, has never been perfect. There are no angels or villains when it comes to wars. Everybody has a little bit of dirt on them. You understand? He made some mistakes. But other than that, I have always admired the position of Ojukwu during the Civil War, that this was a man that was ready to stand up and defend the lives and property of his own people. And I have had many, many links with Igbos over the years. I've argued the Igbo position on many occasions. I believe that self-determination is part of international law, and everybody has a legitimate right to say they want to opt out of any federation at any point in time. I believe in that strongly. And for anybody to be compelled to stay within a federation against their will, I think is wrong. The problem the Igbos or the Biafrans made was that they wanted to take all the oil with them, and the people, and I think that really was the issue. But I'm not against Igbos. I have many Igbo friends. If I was against Igbos, I don't think I would ever have had anything to do with Bianca Ono before she married Ojukwu. She was very close to me. Yes, we went out together for a number of years when I was at Cambridge University. She was my girlfriend. She's an Igbo. And I've been out with other Igbo women since then. I almost married an Igbo girl at one point in my life. So I think I'm the last person you will lay that charge against. But I am also a Yoruba man, you understand? And I can't be somewhere and somebody gets up to denigrate my people and to question the role of the leader of the Yorubas, even though he's not alive to defend himself. Those of us in the next generation are very much alive. And we would certainly defend the legacy and defend his name where we believe that it's important to do so. And we do. We believe it's very important to do that.
Okay, let's look at history now. It seems in Nigeria there seems to be a divide in terms of historical fact and ethnic groups. The Igbos have their own history, or have their own beliefs as to what happened during the Civil War. The Yorubas have their own belief. The Hausas have their own belief. Why does there seem to be this divide in
No,
history?
let me be very frank with you. History does not give room for ethnic, religious, or even subjective interpretations. That's the beauty of history. It's very, very important that we all understand that facts are sacred. As you journalists say, facts are sacred. Opinion is cheap. I can have whatever opinion I have about anybody. It really doesn't matter. It's just my opinion. But facts are sacred. And that's why I think we in Nigeria, and indeed we in Africa, miss it. Have you noticed that it's very difficult for Nigerians, even Africans generally, but Nigerians particularly, to discuss history? Because they get emotionally involved. They become so subjective and their emotions becloud their thinking. There was a very famous British historian called Sir Trevor Hugh Roper, one of the greatest British historians that ever lived. And he said something about Africa, which was quite insulting actually. But he said, the history of Africa is darkness, nothing but darkness. Very insulting. And he was challenged on a debate on TV in the UK a number of years ago that, how could you say that? He said, wow. He said, because the minute you talk to an African about his own history, different versions, oral history, nobody really knows what happened, there's no evidence of anything. People just say what they want to say, and they say, well, even if that wasn't the real history, let's just say it was, in order to make our position strong. And this is what I see here. How can you say an Igbo man will see the war and relate a different historical account to a Yoruba man or another? You're right, but it's unfortunate. History is history. There was a war. Certain things happened on certain dates. These are facts. People did certain things. These are facts. It's very simple. It either happened or it didn't happen. The problem we have here is that you will get people like Achebe who will get up and try to revise history, paint the full picture. If you like, say Awolowo and Gawan were partly responsible in your view. Fine. But don't forget to say that Ojukwu also had a little role to play in the whole thing. Do your research. Do the work. Do your homework. And then you can come out and say what you want. The problem is that when you have people that are literally icons, and Achebe is an icon. He's a great man, a great writer. Unfortunately, Professor Wole Soyinka seemed to have done a little bit better and got the Nobel Prize as opposed to, and I sincerely pray that one day Achebe will achieve that as well. But a great writer commands an enormous following of people within, not just in Nigeria, in the international community. For him to come out with that, imagine the impact that will have on millions of Igbo youth today and to come in the future. Pick up Achebe's book. Oh, Awolowo and the Yorubas were responsible for the starvation of our people. This is unacceptable. We need to be careful, and we want to relate history. Let's be factual about it. And we shouldn't limit this. Let me give you two quick examples of where, again, we got it wrong. And I personally made an intervention because I believe that even if it speaks against me as an individual or against anyone dear to me, truth is the most important thing when you're talking about historical matters. Don't bring your emotion into it, okay? I'll give you two examples where I had to make a personal intervention, and I think against what I call historical revisionism, which is what Achebe is trying to do. There was the first case a few years ago where, well, for a number of years, if I were to ask you who moved the motion for Nigeria's independence successfully, probably depending on where you come from in Nigeria, you would say one thing or the other. But the overwhelming majority of Nigerians will say that, oh, it was Chief Anthony Enahoro. He moved it in 1953, and he's such a great man. And the man was alive throughout those years. He kept on enjoying those accolades and so on and so forth. And most Nigerians actually believed it to be true. I mean, they would swear by it. And this was just wrong. It wasn't true. It was a lie. He never did. He moved a motion, and it failed in 1953. The motion for Nigeria's independence was not successfully moved until 1958, and it was moved by a member of the federal parliament called Chief Femi Fani Kayode, who happens to be my father. It was moved, it was accepted by the House, it was accepted by the British, and they agreed to have independence. There was an amendment later. Tafawa Balewa came in and said October the 1st as opposed to April the 2nd, 1960. But the fact is that it wasn't Enahoro. Fani Kayode played a role, Njoku played a role, Raymond Njoku, the former Minister of Transport, and Tafawa Balewa played a role. So Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa, we all played a role in this thing. And even Enahoro played his own role by starting off the process, in 1953. But to say Enahoro did this, and most Nigerian children, even people in my generation, accepted that to be historical fact, is just So unacceptable. It can't happen anywhere else but in Nigeria. The other one, very quickly, was the issue of the death of Sir Tafawa Balewa, which was a far more serious issue. A couple of years ago, I'm sitting in my house and I'm watching and I'm reading an article written by no less a person as Chief Matthew Mbu, one of the greatest statesmen we ever had in this country. He was a minister under Tafawa Balewa's government in the 50s. He was also, interestingly enough, I believe a minister in the Biafran government. He gets up and he says that Tafawa Balewa was not killed by Ifejuana and the other Igbo coup plotters in January 15th, 1966, and that his body was intact, he was not murdered, he was not killed, trying to revise history. And who was the person that got up to say this wasn't true? As was the first case, I was the one that first brought people's attention to the fact that what they said about Nahru wasn't true. Again, I stood up and I said, no, Mbu, you're wrong. And of course, everybody said, oh, what do you know, what do you know? Then the debate started. The Vanguard newspaper, a whole editorial board of Vanguard went against me and said I didn't know what I was talking about. Then the debate started and everybody started doing their research. By the end of it all, you know what happened? Chief Matthew Mbu, who was almost over 80 years old at the time, a great statesman, a man that so many of us look up to. He's like a father to me, and I've known the family for many, many years. We're very close. He got up publicly to his credit, and he said he's sorry, he was wrong, that he got this information from the great poet Christopher Okibo, who died during the Second World War, during the Civil War, that he really didn't know what he was talking about, and he apologizes to the Balewa family, that evidence is clear that this man was murdered, his body was mutilated, and so on and so forth. The interesting thing about it was this. People like Chief Segun Oshoba and so many others joined in the fray on his side, not even knowing what the facts were. But we got it right then. We set the record straight. And it is in the same light that I will see such a thing when Achebe will get up and speak about Awolowo and Gawan in this way, and the Yoruba people, then I cannot possibly, keep quiet, because we must not allow that to be taken as real history. Let people make up their minds who they want to believe. But I challenge everybody, do your own research, do your homework. Go and read the books written by primarily the British and the French historians. They're far more reliable because they're detached. Go and read the books written by people that actively played a role within the war. Find out what happened. Don't just accept what people tell you from a subjective position or a subjective opinion. Never accept it. That's not history. That is what you call a fairy tale, a fantasy tale. He has written Achebe has written his book as nothing other than a subjective account by somebody that's still living in Biafra, who essentially hates Yoruba people and who resents the fact that during the Civil War, somebody had to win and somebody had to lose. That's how I see it.